Unhappy mutual love. Passion means suffering, something undergone, the mastery of fate over a free and responsible person. To love love more than the object of love, to love passion for its own sake, has been to love to suffer, and to court suffering all the way from Augustine's Amabam Amer down to modern romanticism. Passionate love, the longing for what sears us and annihilates us in its triumph. There is the secret which Europe has never allowed to be given away. A secret it has always repressed and preserved. Hardly anything could be more tragic, and the way passion has persisted through the centuries should cause us to look to the future with deep despondency. Here let me note a feature which will presently call for consideration. Both passion and the longing for death which passion disguises are connected with and fostered by a particular notion of how to reach understanding which in itself is typical of the Western psyche. Why does Western man wish to suffer this passion which lacerates him and which all his common sense rejects? Why does he yearn after this particular kind of love, notwithstanding that its effulgence must coincide with his self-destruction? The answer is that he reaches self-awareness and tests himself only by risking his life, in suffering and on the verge of death. The third act of Wagner's drama represents far more than a romantic disaster. It represents the essential disaster of our sadistic genius. The repressed longing for death, for self-experience to the utmost, for the revealing shock, a longing which, beyond question, manifests the most tenacious root of the war instinct we nourish. From this tragic extreme, illustrated, avowed, and evidenced by the myth in its pristine purity, let us step down to passionate experience as men undergo it today. The tremendous success of the Tristan romance shows, whether we like it or not, that we have a secret preference for what is unhappy. According to the sturdiness of our spirit, this unhappiness may be the, quote, delightful sadness, end of quote, and spleen of 19th century decadence, a transfiguring torment, or a challenge which the mind flings down to the world. According to the sturdiness of our spirit, this unhappiness may be the, quote, delightful sadness, end of quote, and spleen of 19th century decadence, a transfiguring torment, or a challenge which the mind flings down to the world. But in any case, what we pursue is what promises to uplift and excite us, so that in spite of ourselves, we shall be transported into the, quote, real life, end of quote, spoken of by poets. But this, quote, real life, end of quote, is an impossible one. What is heralded by the sky with high-riding clouds and by the empurpled heroic sunset is not day, it is night. Quote, real life is elsewhere, end of quote, Rimbaud said. Quote, real life, end of quote, indeed is but another name for death, and the only name we have dared to invoke it by, even while we were pretending to fend it off. Why is it that we delight most of all in some tale of impossible love? Because we long for the branding, because we long to grow aware of what is on fire inside us. Suffering and understanding are deeply connected. Death and self-awareness are in league. On this alliance, Hegel was able to ground a general explanation of the human mind and also of human history. And European romanticism may be compared to a man for whom sufferings, and especially the sufferings of love, are a privileged mode of understanding. Of course, this is only true of the best romantics among us. Most people do not bother about understanding or about self-awareness. They merely go after the kind of love that promises the most feeling. But even this has to be a love delayed in its happy fulfillment by some obstruction. Hence, whether our desire is for the most self-conscious or simply for the most intense love, Secretly, we desire obstruction, and this obstruction we are ready, if needs be, to invent or imagine. This seems to me to explain much of our psychological nature, unless the course of love is being hindered, there is no romance. And it is romance that we revel in, that is to say, the self-consciousness, intensity, variations, and delays of passion, together with its climax rising to disaster, not its sudden flaring. I'm going to reread that last sentence. This seems to me to explain much of our psychological nature. Unless the course of love is being hindered, there is no romance, and it is romance that we revel in, that is to say, the self-consciousness, intensity, variations, and delays of passion, together with its climax rising to disaster, not its sudden flaring. Consider our literature. The happiness of lovers stirs our feelings only on account of the unhappiness which lies in wait for it. We must feel that life is imperiled and also feel the hostile realities that drive happiness away into some beyond. What moves us is not its presence, but its nostalgia and recollection. Presence is inexpressible and has no perceptible duration. It can only be a moment of grace, as in the duet of Don Giovanni and Zerlina. Otherwise, we will lapse into a picture postcard. Idyll. Happy love has no history in European literature, and a love that is not mutual cannot pass for a true love. The outstanding find may be by European poets. What distinguishes them first and foremost among the writers of the world, what most profoundly expresses the European obsession by suffering as a way to understanding, is the secret of the Tristan myth. Passionate love at once shared and fought against. Anxious for a happiness it rejects and magnified in its own disaster. Unhappy mutual love. Let us pause at this description of the myth. The love is mutual in the sense that Tristan and Isolde, quote, love one another, end of quote, or at least believe that they do. Certainly their mutual fidelity is exemplary. But unhappiness comes in because the love which dominates them is not a love of each other for the other as that other really is. I'm going to reread that. But unhappiness comes in because the love which dominates them is not a love of each for the other as that other really is. They love one another, but each loves the other from the standpoint of self and not from the other's standpoint. Their unhappiness thus originates in a false reciprocity, which disguises a twin narcissism. So much is this so that at times there pierces through their excessive passion a kind of hatred of the beloved. Long before Freud and modern psychology, Wagner saw this. Quote, by me chosen, lost by me, end of quote. Isolde sings in her frantic love. And the sailor's opening song from the masthead predicts the inevitable fate of them both. Quote, westward sweeps the eye, eastward on we fly. The wind so wild blows homeward now. My Irish child, where tarriest thou? Sighs from thy heart ascending. Help to our sails are lending. Sigh, ah sigh, wind so wild. Sigh, ah sigh now, my child, O Irish maid, thou wayward, winsome maid, end of quote. Their passion is twice unhappy in that it flees from both reality and the norm of day. The essential unhappiness of this love is that what they desire they have not yet had. This is death. And that what they had is now being lost, the enjoyment of life. And yet far from this loss being felt as privation, the couple imagine that they are now more fully alive than ever and are more than ever living dangerously and magnificently. The approach of death acts as a goad to sensuality. In the full sense of the verb, it aggravates desire. Sometimes even it aggravates desire to the point of turning this into a wish to kill either the beloved or oneself, or to founder in a twin downrush. Hear now my will, ye craven winds, Isolde begins by singing. Come forth to strife and stress of the storm, to turbulent tempests, clamor and fury. Drive from her dreams the slumbering sea. Wake from the depths all her envious greed. Destroy now this insolent ship, let its wreck be sunk in her waves. All that hath life and breath upon it, I leave to you winds as your prize. Drawn to a death remote from the life that has been spurring them on, the lovers are doomed to become the voluptuous prey of conflicting forces that will cast both into the same headlong swoon. For they can never be united till, bereft of all hope and of all possible love, they reach the heart of utter obstruction and experience the supreme exaltation which is destroyed in being fulfilled.